Let's turn some stashed crochet cotton into a bright, happy and fun table runner. Hi everyone, it's Steph and welcome to another video. Here I wanted to show you a little bit of what I do to work out the process and also how I want a finished product to be. So this is basically where I record how long I want something, how wide I want something, and a rough idea of what it's going to look like from here. I then do all of the unpopular math that tells me how much yarn I'm going to need for each colour in total, for warp and for weft. I work out how wide and how long the finished product needs to be, and then work out what width in the reed I'm going to need and what length I'm going to need to weave. And I already know that the crochet cotton shrinks anywhere between 6 and 9.5%. So I'm just going to add 10% onto what I want the finished product to be for warp and weft. So here is also where I record whether I'm going to have a fringe or not have a fringe and do a hem. And this is also where I keep all of these workings out as well, and then I save it so that I can actually just go back on my iPad to it whenever I want to make something similar, and I can see if there's anything I want to adjust or change or do exactly the same thing again. The crochet cotton that I'm using today is 100% cotton. You can get acrylic, you can get a polyester, you can get a mix and a blend of everything. So just be aware so that you know that the actual material is going to match your product. For me, I just personally prefer working with 100% cotton. The weft will be this cotton mop yarn that I showed you in my stash video. Initially I was going to do lots of red in this table runner because I really liked how the red interacted with this kind of very pale peach. I was trying to find all the really bright, happy colours that reminded me of things like a field of flowers or spring blooms or a bowl of all kinds of different fruits, but basically something that's just bright, fun, colourful. Also, of course, because I don't have very much of each colour, so it was always going to be a real mishmash of lots of different colours together. So I'm using my 60cm loom today with a 10 dent reed, and I'm also doubling the cotton in the warp, so I'm warping through all of the slots and all of the holes. I'm centering here for a weaving width of 36 centimeters and marking the edges with some scrap yarn. I tried using my yarn holder for warping, but the yarn just kept tangling around the actual holders, so I ended up abandoning that and going back to my old-fashioned plastic bowl and popping the yarn ball in that to stop it from going all over the place as I warp. With the colours, I'm literally making this up as I go. So what I'm doing is mirroring the same on the left side to the right side, and that way it just means that everything looks the same and it has continuity, and it just gives it a bit of a finished look. Here I'm looking at what I've done so far with the red and I'm just not loving it. So I left it overnight and I've come back this morning to see if I like it again, and I don't. So I'm removing a fair bit of the red. For me, the red just looks a little bit too overpowering. It may have looked better if it was the reds and a lot of olive greens and neutrals. I think that would have looked really good, but because I've got all of these other bright colours as well, the red is just too much and it's just taking over. So what I decided to do is remove the big chunks of red, still leaving a little bit in the centre and a little bit on the edges. But I'm just feeling like that will be enough red for it not to be too much. So I'm leaving about 4 doubled threads on the selvages and leaving 1 or 2 in the middle. Once I'd removed all of the red that I didn't want, I then filled in those areas with other colours that I felt looked nice next to each other. I'm just making it up as I go along, just using colours that I feel look good next to each other, and then mirroring that left side to the right side, and then I've done a different thinner strip in the middle. So overall, I'm really happy with how it's looking. It's definitely bright and happy and cheerful, which is what I wanted. And of course, having that light peach color in the weft will really help calm it down a bit also. Once I've tied off that very last warp string, I just went through and did my usual check to make sure I had warped through every slot and every hole and hadn't missed any, because it's a lot easier to fix now than it is later on, for sure. Everything looked really good, so now it's time to wind on. As usual, I'm winding on towards the pegs because this project is the length of my dining table, which is 1.9 meters, and it's just easier to wind on towards the pegs. Anything longer than that, then I would use my DIY tension device. I'm using my usual thick brown craft paper as my warp separator also. One of the great things about doubling your warp and warping through every hole and every slot is that there is no threading required. So once I finished winding on, I just got it all sorted onto my weaving stand, and then I could go straight into doing all of the knots and lashing on. To lash on, I grab a group of 8 doubled threads and pop a knot just down the bottom of each group. I try to make the knots roughly line up across all of the groups across the warp so that they're nice and even. But to lash on, I take a length of scrap yarn that's about 4 to 5 widths of my loom, and I tie one end onto my apron rod and then wind up about half into a yarn butterfly. Then I grab the first group of 8 doubled threads, divide them in half, drop the scrap yarn through the top, around the bottom of the apron rod, and then continue that across all of the groups of threads until I get to the end. As always, I like to adjust and tighten as I go. Once I've finished, I then check the tension by strumming the warp behind the heddle to make sure that it's all nice and even, and I can make any adjustments that I need to then. Once I'm happy, I can tie off the end of the scrap yarn onto the apron rod at the other side, and we are lashed on and ready to start weaving. Before we start weaving, we need to spread the warp. So to do this, I do 3 picks of scrap yarn without beating, and then beat those 3 picks all the way down to where the knots are fairly firmly until you've got a nice straight line down the bottom. I then repeat, do another 3 picks without beating, and then beat those 3 picks down as well, and that's usually all I need to spread the warp. And that 1.5 inches or 2 inches of yarn where we've spread the warp, that is going to be where my very short 1-inch fringe is going to be. Because I am having a very short fringe on this table runner, I'll be doing a very simple 2x2 hem stitch. So I'll be starting the weaving with just a little bit of neutral cream colour, and then I'm doing a 2x2 hem stitch, and then that will be all I'll need to do to secure the end of the weaving. I'm not going to show you hem stitching in the table runner video, but when I do the placemats, which I'm currently halfway through, to go with this table runner, I will be doing a tutorial on 2 or 3 different ways that you can do a hem stitch as well, which should help you. The 2x2 hem stitch is a favourite of mine because it just looks so neat on the front and is just a little tiny cross on the back, and it's so quick and so easy. Anyway, after finishing the hem stitching, then I could get on to the weaving. I wound a shuttle with the cotton mop yarn and started to weave. I did cover the knots and also those knobby ends from the pegs that I used in the textile upgrade. But as always, my favourite part of the process is just watching something that you've created in your mind come to fruition as an actual project. It's so satisfying. I'm loving how the very light peach colour just calms all of the colours down. So now you're kind of left with a real citrusy feel to the table runner, which I actually really love. Whilst I'm weaving, I guess now is a good time to give you a little bit of an update on Brisbane after Tropical Cyclone Alfred. So where I live, we had most of the storm impacts on Saturday overnight, but it definitely started on Friday and the impacts didn't really stop until Monday. But we did have a fairly high wind, and by high wind I mean enough to really rattle the windows, and when that goes on for 8 hours or more, it can be a little bit scary. I'm so glad it ended up just being a Category 1 when it hit the mainland. It hit the islands as a Category 2, and that kind of took a little bit of the sting out of it, and it dropped down to a Category 1, which I'm very grateful for. Life is slowly getting back to normal. It's taken me a few weeks just to fix things and tidy up and do all of the bits and pieces that you do after something like this, and it's taken me a little while to get back into a routine. But I'm back in my routine now, and I've gone and edited this video to bring it to you, so thank you so much for your patience. When I got to the end of the weaving, I did my 2x2 hem stitch and then measured off the width of one of my shuttles to cut a nice neat fringe, and I did the same on the bottom as well. As always, I bunged it straight into my washing machine with a little bit of dish soap to get rid of any machine oils, and then I ran it through the dryer so it's all pre-shrunk and ready to go. I gave it a quick iron and cut off all of my tails, and it's done. I actually really love this table runner. It turned out to be a lot nicer than I thought it would be. Let me know what you think in the comments.